Tonight, Jesus says these words, "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another just as I have loved you. You also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." So tonight is Maundy Thursday. We call it Maundy Thursday. Maundy means mandate. And so he gives this mandate, this commandment to love others as he's loved us, our Lord Jesus. And he has given us an example of how to love others by washing his disciples' feet, which was a shameful act back in the first century, especially for someone who is highly revered, a teacher, to do that for his students. But it's, in a sense, it's a picture of self-sacrifice. It doesn't matter to him the humiliation. It doesn't matter that he is serving other people and not being served himself. But it's a way that he can love his disciples as an example, a call for them to love others just as he has loved them. So tonight, I want to share with you a story about similar love, an incredible love, a way in which my wife, Lottie, and I, and our little baby girl, were shown love and met Jesus through the body of Christ, through the church, through a really difficult season, the birth of our daughter, Clementine. So as background, it was last year, it was our anniversary weekend, and Lottie shares with me that she's pregnant. And I'm thrilled. I'm super excited. I've wanted to have kids for a while. I was probably more gung-ho than she was at first, but we were both really thrilled about this. And the next several months, Lottie had a really easy pregnancy where she didn't have much. I don't think she had any morning sickness, maybe a little bit of sickness here and there, but there were no complications for the longest time. And in about 33 weeks in, there's some yellow flags that pop up. And so Lottie starts to go to the doctor about twice a week for non-stress tests, just to check to make sure the baby's okay and things are all right. It's December. It's Monday, December 7th. And Lottie goes to the midwives and they do a non-stress test, and they say to her, "Your baby is incredibly healthy. We don't expect any complications or anything like that happening." And they plan to induce her close to the due date, close to 40 days, 40 weeks. Sorry, 40 days would be really fast. And it's the next morning at 11 a.m., Lottie comes to me and says, "I haven't felt the baby move all day." And you have to understand, our baby was really active in the belly, in Lottie's belly. And we would feel her move all the time. And so I go and start packing bags. And I say, "We have to get ready to go now." So Lottie does everything that she can to get this baby to move. She does jumping jacks, drinks cold water, drinks juice, does inversions, and even turns on the blender to try to get the baby to jump a little bit, because that would always work. Nothing. So we go to the midwives, and I'm not allowed to go inside. I'm in the car waiting, and Lottie has a non-stress test, and she texts me back and says the baby has a strong heartbeat. I'm like, great, that's awesome to hear. But something's going on with this non-stress test, and the baby's really unresponsive. So they get me inside, which is a big red flag for me. And they sneak us into the ultrasound room because they had been overbooked with ultrasound appointments that day. And they didn't want anyone to see us going in there. They didn't want to tick anybody off. And they do an 8-point test of our baby in the womb. And our baby has a heartbeat, and there's amniotic fluid. She gets 2 out of 8. Baby's completely unresponsive. So they say, "We need to send you to the hospital for additional monitoring." And as we're leaving and getting into the car, Lottie's saying to me, "This is not good. This is not good. Something is wrong." And I say, "Shut up, please. I know something's wrong." And I'm not that harsh. I'm a lot nicer. But I'm like, "I know something's wrong. Please stop saying that." We get to the hospital. They actually let us cut in line and go through a lot of the COVID screenings because I say our baby's not moving. So we get into our room. And we're there for like 4 minutes, and they get monitors on the baby, and listen to her heartbeat. And the midwife that's on call, who Lottie really trusted her and still trusts her, said, I'm not liking what I'm seeing with this. I'm not liking what I'm seeing. We need to do an emergency C-section like now. And at that point, we were still thinking, oh, Lottie can go into labor. Maybe they'll induce her. But they said, we need to rush right now. So they take Lottie into an operating room, and they put me in this big, I don't even remember, it was either white or green, like onesie. And I was out there waiting in the hall, just waiting to go inside. And I didn't know this at the time, but Lottie told me that while she was there inside, they couldn't find the baby's heartbeat, which was really hard for her. The OB came and listened and said, no, I hear the baby's heartbeat. We need to act right now. And so I think they skipped some of the protocols just because it's an emergency. They pull me inside, and there's this big green screen over Lottie's chest, and she's kind of being moved back and forth. So I know they're cutting her open and all that. And I'm just with her, holding her hand. And then I don't remember what the doctor says, something along the lines of, hey, Dad, you want to, what is it? Or something. I don't remember what they had said. But I look up and I look at our baby, and I see our baby, and I say, it's a girl, because it's a teeny little baby girl who's pale, who's not moving, and isn't breathing. And they immediately take her over to this side table, this little teeny table, like with a bed with a heat lamp on it. They intubate the baby, and I see all these nurses rush over and are flicking the baby's feet, are pushing on the baby, saying, come on, breathe, come on. And I'm watching this baby struggle for life. And I'm looking over at Lottie, who can't see what's going on, but sees the heart monitor crashing because it's monitoring our baby. And she says, what's going on? And I look back over, and I just see our baby on this table. And I'm breathing really fast and praying under my breath. And it was really difficult because I thought I was going to see our baby die right there on that little bed. But minutes pass, and she's still alive. And the nurses call me over, and they say, okay, you can help us by putting your hands on her and help keep her warm. Well, my hands are freezing and they're shaking because I'm so scared. So I put my hands up to this heat lamp that's supposed to be heating our little baby girl. And then I try to put my hand on her belly just to kind of keep her warm. Then they let me cut her umbilical cord, whatever was left, because they had to cut the umbilical cord pretty fast. And so I got to do that. They swaddle our baby and then rush her out of the room. Lottie got to see her for a split second, but she was swaddled, so she couldn't really see her. And that was that. And we had to wait for 2 hours for a rapid COVID test to come back before we can even see our baby. So that was a very difficult night. But eventually, the test comes back negative, and I get to go. Lottie can't go because she's just had major surgery, and see our baby girl, who's still, struggling really hard to breathe, has a breathing tube in, and the doctor tells me that she's one of the more critical babies in the NICU, which isn't something you want to hear. But what they tell me, and I don't remember if they tell me then or at another point in time, she had hemorrhaged in the womb. She had bled out basically into Lottie. So they were giving her blood transfusions, and they were fighting to help her, stay alive and stay healthy. But she seems to come more stable through the night. And I get to spend most of that night with our little girl, taking pictures and sending it to Lottie. I took one picture, it was not a flattering picture. I sent it to Lottie, and Lottie and I, before we had a baby, we told each other we wanted to be really honest. And if we had an ugly baby, we were going to admit it. And I sent this picture, and Lottie's like, oh no, we have an ugly baby. But it was just a bad picture. It was not a flattering picture. She was a beautiful little girl, really pale and small, but she was beautiful. The next day, I get to take Lottie in the wheelchair to go and see Clementine. We didn't name her Clementine yet, but we got to go and spend time with her and read to her and be around her. Eventually, we landed on the name Clementine Augusta Venable O'Sullivan, named after Saint Clement, Saint Augustine, and then Lottie's late grandmother, who had passed away just a couple of weeks before Clementine's birth. So we get time with her. There's some odd things happening in the background, and eventually the neonatologist comes to us and says, Clementine's having seizures. They give her medication to stop it, and it seems to stop it. They do an ultrasound of her brain, and there's no blood on the brain that they can see, and so they're not exactly sure why, what's going on with her having seizures. But it seems like things are okay. I mean, that's freaky to hear. You don't want to hear that your baby's having seizures. Lottie gets discharged from the hospital. We go home. We have a lovely evening. We watch a movie, Chef, on Netflix, and then wake up the next morning, and we're going to get ready to go to the hospital when I get a phone call from a nurse saying, you have to come right now. She's having seizures again. And so we rush to the hospital. And they tell us that she's having seizures and that they're going to give her another medication. And hopefully this one will help. But if it doesn't work, then they have to give her a strong sedative, and there's nothing else they could do. They have to send her to another hospital. And so we really hope that that's not going to happen. At this point, they have Clementine hooked up to this EEG machine, it has all these little monitors with cables and cords kind of coming back, and they're monitoring her brain waves to see what's going on. And it seems like her seizures stop. We don't really know, but we really want to stay and be with her. So they give us a parent room so we could stay the night and go and visit Clementine whenever we feel like we could. And so we stayed with her as long as we could. I remember we even went the next morning at 7 a.m. to go see her, and she seemed like she was doing okay. The nurse didn't seem concerned. An hour and a half later, though, we were back in our room. I don't remember if we were napping or what, but a nurse comes in and says, you have to come back. She's having seizures again, and she's been having them all night, and they're really serious. So we go back, and she's having seizures every few minutes. And what's happening is that she stops breathing, and her heart rate dips and her oxygen levels dip, and then the monitors just go crazy while this is happening. And I remember Lottie is holding her little hand as she's going through these seizures. And it's really hard to go through all of that, but then they tell us, we have to transfer her. So they call the ambulance and put Clementine on a stretcher. And that's something no parent should ever have to see. A little infant girl on a stretcher about to be taken in an ambulance. We lose it then. We're weeping in the hospital. And I'm trying to grab every little thing that Clementine touched. The little sheet that she was on top of, this little floral sheet that was kind of covering her little bed. I take that and just take it home with me. But after that, we go to our parent room and we just weep. But we pull ourselves together and head to Brenner's and follow her there. But we have to wait in a waiting room for 4 hours to see her, to go to her room. But eventually we get to go and see her and be in that room. And there's a little teeny half futon in there that can sort of fit one person. Naturally, we try to stay the night every night and both fit on it, and it just didn't work. But we got to be in the same room with her. And it was really eerie, though, because she was out. She was essentially in a drug-induced coma. And every time we went and go and see her through the night, she was just there. It felt like we were at a wake going to a body. It was weird. And when upon transferring, I call Tom and tell him I think we'd like to do an emergency baptism because we don't know. This is the second time. We just don't know if our little girl's going to make it. So Tom is somehow able to get into the hospital. He brings us Holy Communion and guides me through baptizing her. And all I can do with my hands is take little drops of water and sprinkle them on her because she's covered with cables and all kinds of stuff. And but I get to baptize my little girl. It seems the next few days that her seizures seem to stop after this medication, this really strong medication. And we finally get some answers. Doctors come to us and tell us that they did a second ultrasound. And this time there's blood on her brain. There's a lot of blood on her brain. Kind of like when you get a bruise, you have this initial injury and blood doesn't show up right away, but then eventually it kind of seeps into where the wound is, and you can notice a bruise on the surface. That's sort of what happened when she hemorrhaged in the womb. There was damage to the brain, but it didn't show initially. But there was quite a bit. And they did an MRI, and the doctor sat down with us and showed us what had happened. That she had had a stroke in the back of her brain. She had a grade 3 brain bleed on one side, which means that there's blood pooling in the ventricles, and then a grade 4 on the other, which means that the blood that had pooled in the ventricles had seeped out into the brain tissue, and the brain just was very aggravated and swollen. And they told us that she was likely going to have serious developmental delays, or almost positively would have serious developmental delays and likely long-term disabilities. But what we heard, which we were thrilled about, was that she wasn't going to die, because we were so worried that at any moment she could just die. But it was a really sobering conversation, and it's difficult to hear. But the next few days, we see our little girl perk up. She stops having seizures. They wean her off of this very strong medication, and we finally get to see her move around a bit more and really open her eyes. And Christmas Eve, we have her dressed up in a toboggan and wearing this little Christmas onesie with her big dark eyes just looking around. She's so beautiful. And we were so thankful for that. And this was about 2 weeks in. It was the day after Christmas, and she starts to slow down again, and not wake up as often and not move around as much. And her oxygen levels and her heart rate start to dip a lot. And so all the monitors go off crazy, and it's happening every few hours. And then over in the night, it starts happening even more frequently. And the next morning, it's happening every few minutes that her heart rate would dip to these really low levels. So much so that the daytime nurse that had just come in, didn't feel comfortable leaving us, didn't feel comfortable leaving the room and checking on another baby. So they had to call the doctor in. And the doctor had said, well, how about you try rolling her onto her belly? And it seemed to help quite a bit. And what we come to learn later on is that she has really low tone in her airway. So she was having kind of apnea, where she was having trouble breathing. So when they rolled her on her belly, it opened her airway up a little bit more and she could breathe more. But they were afraid of seizures again. So they roll that monitor back in and put the EEG with all the little leads and the cables on her head again. And Lottie and I make the decision to try to Google and find out what's going on in that monitor, which is not anything I would recommend anyone doing, because it sent us to a very dark place, because we thought she was, again, for the third time, we thought she was going to die. In background to this, that morning, I had heard wailing from another room with a mother crying out, my baby, who I'm pretty sure that baby had passed away. And so it was a really dark place for me in particular. So we tried to leave, go get food. We went to Taco Bell, naturally, one of our favorite places. And we just were parked in that parking lot crying again. And I just wanted to drive up the road as far as I could go, and not turn back, just to escape it all. Not to leave Clementine, but just to get away. But we came back, stayed the night, and the next morning the neurologist said she's not having seizures. She has some abnormal brain activity, but she's not having seizures, which was a huge relief. That day, she cries for the first time. And it was wonderful to hear that. 2 weeks, we hadn't heard our baby girl cry. A few days later, she drinks from the bottle for the first time. And she's starting to recover and do so well, just over leaps and bounds. And we were in and out. We were in the NICU. Clementine was in the NICU, but we stayed with her for 50 days. There were days where we came home, but we were there with her for 50 days. By the end of it, really the only thing holding her there was the fact that she just had some trouble eating. And then by the time she came home, she was a completely different baby. She didn't have problems. It was so weird. And now there are still continued complications. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we were in the hospital again. But she's just drastically improved. And we would attribute that to God, to the miraculous and healing our little girl. And gosh, it's just been wonderful to really see how wonderful, sweet, and beautiful a little girl really is. So that's, in a nutshell, that's just our story. And God met us in multiple ways throughout this difficult season. He met us through the three Christian virtues. He actually spoke the words faith and hope to us in a way, and that's going to have to be a sermon for another time, and it's in really weird ways. I'll have to share that a different time. But what struck me, and especially as I was preparing this sermon, was the ways in which God showed his love for us. So Jesus, in this Maundy Thursday, said this: "A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you. You are also to love one another. By this, all people know you are my disciple." And Lottie and I were shown incredible love by the disciples of Jesus, by the body of Christ. We met Jesus through you guys, through the church. We were blown away by how so many people reached out to us just through texts saying, "We love you guys. We're praying for you." People I hadn't heard from in a long time. Hearing that literally thousands of people were praying for us. All the churches in our diocese, but then churches outside of our diocese, random people going up to my in-laws in their hometown and saying, "Hey, how's your little granddaughter doing? We're praying for her." And them saying, "Who are you?" Like random people praying for us. People reached out to me on Facebook saying, "You don't know who we are, but we just wanted to share our story of how God worked in the life of our little boy who has had a serious brain injury also." It just lifted us up so much. And on top of that, people showered us with gifts. One gift was friends who came into our home and decorated our home for Christmas while we were in the hospital. Another gift, gift cards so that we could eat meals when we came home, so that we didn't have to worry about preparing our next meal as we were still kind of treading water at home. People gave us financial gifts, and we haven't had to worry about any hospital bills, which I'm so thankful for. One gift is so really, really touches me. High Point Christian Academy, I think that's the name of the school. Their 4th grade class there made these little Clementine bracelets to remind them to pray for Clementine. And they would sell these. And the proceeds went to Clementine's hospital bills. It's just amazing. People made homemade blankets that were prayed over, and we got to wrap them in Clementine. There's so many ways in which you guys showed love to us that we weren't expecting, but are so thankful for. God showed his love for us through you. And there's not much else that I could say except thank you. This is our story. We found ourselves in a place of just complete and utter dependence on God, and he carried us and provided for us specifically through the love of Christ that we met through you. We were overwhelmed, and we still are, by the love of Christ and the church family. We met Jesus through our church family's love, and even it was interesting, even people not part of the church showed love to us, and we would attribute that to God. But the way that the church loved us, I think to me, it was miraculous. Jesus' words rang true for us, and I'm sure for so many others who saw the way you guys loved us. By this, all people know you are my disciples, if you have love for one another.